Welcome to my solo Chicago experience. This trip to one of my favorite cities is full of exciting sights and wonderful places. Where I'd never taken the task of traveling solo before, it seemed like a towering obstacle to conquer at first. But I was confident in my abilities and I was ready to take it on. From the fantastic curated collections of museums to navigating the grid-like structure of the city. So, without further ado, please enjoy. To start off the trip, I had to actually get there first. I opted to fly through Toronto Pearson Airport as the first destination on my grand adventure. Flying's never really bothered me much, so that wasn't an issue. What was unique that I hadn't experienced prior was the empty seats on this flight. To be fair, it was a random weekday, so it was mainly for business trips, I suppose. On the screens they displayed the safety instructions, but through a tourism advertising style thing, which was quite fun overall, even with a yoga segment representing the crash positions. Before I knew it, we were off. After taxiing at the tarmac, the plane soared above the cloud. To this day, the feats of human ingenuity allowing us to cover such great distances over such a short time impresses me all the same. I also got these garlic butter pretzels, which are honestly quite good. From this angle, it looked like we were truly flying around the world. Eventually, we lowered over the cerulean blue of Lake Michigan and began our approach to the windy city down below. Thankfully, the Chicago Transport Authority runs trains from the airport into the city itself. The train was a tad slow getting out of the airport, but once we got out of that area, we started moving towards the adventure of a lifetime. Throughout our neighborhoods, I found one station I liked in particular.
This is David.
That's me! Back on track, disembarking the Blue Line, I was able to do some sightseeing on my walk to the hotel. With the light snow cascading on the city, it made for a perfect scene on my journey. Here's me trying to get some footage of entering the hotel room. And here's me fumbling with my bags and my phone. I know, masterful camera work. Following that, I settled into my hotel room with quite a nice view of the city down below. After a quick break, it was time I set off towards the Willis Tower. That tall, shiny building in the distance, the one I've been following for all this time, nestled in the heart of the loop of downtown Chicago. Wait, hold on, let's see. Trump Tower? Okay, so somehow I ended up following the wrong tower because I hadn't searched up what it looked like before. So now I was even further north from my destination than when I started. Anyways, it wasn't too long to get back on track. And here we finally have the Willis Tower, on the first try. The interior was very well decorated for Christmas, featuring string lights and a towering Christmas tree in the central area. The reason I came to the Willis Tower was for the Skydeck Chicago, an experience that started with a museum celebrating Chicago's rich history as the US's third most populated city, from raising Chicago from the depths of the marsh to the fire that devastated its infrastructure. Chicago is known for its perseverance and willpower required to build such a city in the first place. These displays really showcased how proud people are to call Chicago their home, and it definitely makes a strong case for how impressive its history resulted in the place we see today. Finally, I made it to the top of Willis Tower for the main attraction of the evening. The skydeck views of the entire city at dusk were genuinely breathtaking. When I stepped out the elevator, I knew I was in for the perfect views. Lake Michigan's waves crashing against the coast of the fantastic city, the history of which we just learned. If you look closely, you might be able to spot a certain silver tower that's not the Willis Tower. Once it was my turn, I went to walk in the glass boxes, which they assured were safe, so it was only slightly terrifying to be that close to falling so many stories down. Also, here's me trying to take a photo, but getting a video instead. I'm no stranger to city lights, but to me, Chicago felt so different in its own unique way. It allowed me to appreciate it all the more from up here. Like all tourist attractions, they have their own share of merchandise, but the prices for each item were really steep. Unbelievably so. Who's paying $80 US for a hoodie, or almost $40 for a cap? Within the Willis Tower was a Shake Shack, a fast food place only recently making ground in Canada, but a staple for any time I'm in the States. The lemonade was perfect as usual, and the fries were perfectly crisp. 9 out of 10. Yeah, so that was day 1 of the Chicago trip. Honestly, pretty great, all things considered. I also, at the Willis Tower, I bought this Chicago skyline paperweight, and that's a pretty cool souvenir. It has the bean, tower, just basically the skyline, even like a funny taxi there. Alright, see you for now. If you like travel videos like this, I'd urge you to like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel a lot in 2025, so any support is greatly appreciated. There's more travel content ahead, but for now, back to the Chicago video. For day 2, I need to preface this to start. It was so cold. You can see the wind picking up the frost over the river. Nevertheless, I started my walk to my first breakfast. Along the way, I found an elephant and castle, but unlike Toronto's one, it doesn't even try to look like a castle. Like, what the heck is this? The Pittsfield Cafe claimed to be a place for tourists on its menu, but was entirely populated by older locals. I had a standard breakfast platter, and the service was lightning fast with some excellent hash browns. Highly recommend this place, 8 out of 10. Early in the morning, I walked over and visited Millennium Park, featuring its key attraction, the Cloud Gate, also known as the Bean. Up close, its reflective surface is quite impressive, and despite the meme, it was very fun to visit. To further prove how cold it was, you can literally see the breath in this shot. They also have the crown fountains, which display these really creepy faces that in the summer shoot out water. Now at today's attraction, the Art Institute of Chicago is a fantastic collection of works that I would soon get to see. Though I misread the website and it only opened an hour from then. Using that time, I visited the Primark back in central downtown and realized that it was just a 5-minute walk from where I had breakfast, so I did this whole loop of walking just to end up back where I was before. Returning to the Art Institute now that it was open, I found myself immersed in a place far more impressive than I could have imagined. This gallery has a grand reputation, and even at its entrance it upheld this to an excellent degree. Leading off with a fantastic selection of Buddhist statues, into an elaborate Japanese prints. The utmost care and preservation this institute had gave me a much stronger impression of not just the artwork itself, but its cultural histories leading to each creation. One room in particular was dark and near silent, featuring the legendary Great Wave off Kanagawa, on loan to the institute until late January 2025. The immaculate detailing required to capture such a scene even on a small print shows us a glimpse of the artistic passion behind its vast following. Moving into the pieces of East and Southeast Asia, it's clear to me this gallery is more than just a display, but a community of cultures being represented in such a fantastic mosaic. Egyptian artifacts, scrolls, and tablets find their home here as well, granting us an artistic insight into the day-to-day lives of the civilization's people. The detail on the sarcophagus itself is simply fantastic and gives us a further look into the ideas of life and death for the ancient Egyptians. Moving into the Mediterranean, a melting pot of vast cultures traveling the coasts of these different city-states, shifting leadership and artistic styles. These statues, carvings, and elaborate representations of mythology covers a wider scale significance that the Greeks placed on their pantheon of gods. From impressive marble statues, to the carvings on the walls, to more subtle things like ceramics, or even to the city-state coin seals themselves representing various countries. Making my way through the modern wing, I arrived at the Arts of the Americas, featuring some excellently captured landscapes. These fantastical detailings capture scenes so elegantly, more than any photograph can manage in my opinion. Throughout the museum, it features even more stunning famous pieces like the American Gothic, Nighthawks, Vincent van Gogh's self-portrait, and Sunday on the Grand. Traversing these halls gave me a lot of time to reflect on my own art endeavors, and the art of today's day and age, and a sense of longing for what once was. As I visited the last couple of exhibits, I found myself in the Mrs. James Miniature Collection, featuring intricately designed rooms that rivaled the beauty of their full-size counterparts. With excellent lighting and proper replicas of each unique design style, it served as a wonderful conclusion to my visit at the Art Institute. Walking through Millennium Park as skaters began to populate its ice rink, the wind chill continuing to barrage everyone, yet the joy in the air from the city's inhabitants kept the visitors and locals all in a cheery mood this afternoon. The Wrigley Building was my chosen destination for dinner that evening, though next to it was a very familiar tower that I couldn't possibly confuse for another tower. The building even featured a flag of Canada for home, but more important aspect was Lou Malnati's Pizzeria, home of the deep dish pizza, and I was ready to try for myself. Despite not being a pizza enthusiast, the sauce was incredibly rich with the right amount of cheese to hold the whole thing together. Absolutely worth the full wait for anyone in Chicago. I can't recommend it enough. 9 out of 10. And with that, that's the end of day 2. Pretty good day overall, I'd say as well. But tomorrow is where we get into the stuff I'm really excited for. Our overall haul today from the museum, the Art Gallery Institute, I got this bag referencing the painting of the Sunday on the Seine. As well, magnets. This is a disaster today. I'm already so tired. We'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye. One more thing. Throughout the entire trip, my bag I used to hold my things had a problem with the zipper for some reason. Every time I tried to zip it, part of it would stay loose and unzipped. But occasionally it'll work perfectly fine, and it's just was super inconsistent and just drove me up the wall, honestly. Day 3 was time for the Field Museum. Taking the L train to Jackson Station, it was a short walk along the street towards the museum campus. The walk wasn't as chilly, though this part of the city felt a lot less dense despite what the map said. It was like I was walking out of downtown, but that can't possibly be true. Like, look, there's the Willis Tower. Which is west of the station. So I did it again, being stubborn and just walking without looking at the map to make sure. I somehow walked a full kilometer the wrong way without noticing, which was quite a blunder on my part. I hopped on a bus to try again. Alright, take 2. Little Branch Cafe outside the museum campus. Nice atmosphere, quick service, breakfast platter, same old, same old. This time, however, I had fruit on this platter, which honestly was very good to help recharge, but the other staples were just okay. 7 out of 10. Walking in the correct direction this time, east through the loop and towards museum campus itself, I finally arrived at the Field Museum. Fantastic place for history, culture, relics of the past, and why are there so many school buses here? I kid you not, there were 10, maybe more buses, funneling hundreds of children into this museum. The amount of screaming, running around, roughhousing there was at the entrance, just at this place, it was a cacophony of children. Let's just say their constant presence made this visit a little less enjoyable. The first exhibit I explored was the Ancient Americas, as an in-depth look at the first settlers of lands we know today. This is a large exhibit, but one worth exploring to its fullest extent, I assure you. This line here, clarifying they were also human, though, raises some concerns that had to be clarified. Exploring the artifacts left behind by the Clovis people of the Western Shore sparked my knowledge I learned in my university courses, which made me feel very immersed in connecting the dots. This giant ground sloth looks like he's about to throw hands. As you can see here, every display, artifact, set of information is very well put together in an engaging flow. Had the noise level not been as high as it was, that is. Even this interactive map of a coastal village was being slammed by the children seeing shiny lights and buttons. From here, we can see that once the roots were placed, larger civilizations and cities began to arise with their own cultures, traditions, and ways in which they maintained power. Some plaques featured story-based descriptors, imagining what life was like in these eras and cities, which was a very nice touch. The entire collection was fantastically put together with the right amount of detail to ease of understanding in each display. However, the Aztecs and the Incas weren't the only ancient Americans to settle on this land. Moving further north towards the Arctic, we arrive at the indigenous people of Canada. These features involved an enriching history of these artisan crafts, totem poles, and their spiritual connections, garments, as well as their purposes. The tools for adapting to such harsh environments were also featured here, and altogether leading to a future-oriented view on how these urban cities can make amends in collaboration with these populations, to a connected way of life with respect for one another. The next exhibits were Animals of the Earth, a collection of intricate taxidermy, each with their own species. Though this one of a hawk feeding its babies in particular was quite morbid to see, with the amount of detail put into each one granting every guest with an accurate depiction of these fantastic organisms. Something more than a picture or a book could even convey, yet without even being alive, it's hauntingly beautiful in a way. The collection of mammals was also quite impressive, let alone the accurate sizes of each one. The posing makes them look truly alive in a way that I couldn't even imagine. Preserving the life of organisms since gone, moving through each animal group, I soon arrived at the primates, the clade of which humans fall under and are most similar to. Who is the most unusual primate? Well, this red curtain makes it look pretty mysterious. It's a mirror. Oh, it's me. I should have expected that, honestly. Yes, humans are quite different to our other primate relatives in terms of our bipedal locomotion, development of language, and our lack of speciality, but expertise at adapting to different scenarios. I did find a model of the Barbary macaque, which is one I studied at university, which was cool to see in person. I can't stress this enough how fantastically detailed each model, diorama, and landscape was in its collection. If you're visiting Chicago's Field Museum, this is an absolute must-see. Egypt is in Africa? Yeah, I sure hope people knew that. Out the gate, the Ancient Egypt exhibit had a strange entrance that had stacked stools and chairs and tables in the way. Like, why would this be here and not anywhere else? That aside, the location of the exhibit was quite intricately made, preserving the original limestone tablets and artifacts from the sites themselves. It creates an atmosphere that really transports you inside a buried tomb. Even if some of the walls are cast, the stonework makes this whole thing look— whoa, I did not see that there. A sarcophagus below some glass so we can just stare up is definitely something. I guess we'll see you later on. As much as I enjoyed learning about the construction of such monumental inscriptions, there were still a lot of children in the museum making quite a lot of noise as they progressed forward. Even when Tomb Raiders would steal from these establishments, some were able to be preserved by curators. The act of taking belongings of the deceased, however, was heavily taboo. It was believed that these belongings would go with the dead to the field of reeds once they passed. With it taken, it is lost to them as well. Each person who passed was set on trial through continued ritual before being judged for their lives on Earth. Should it be lighter, your soul could pass to the field of reeds. If not, it was devoured for one's decisions in life. Like the Art Institute, I greatly enjoyed each detailed diorama depicting human life in varied cultures, which is what I seek to study myself. This embalming process for how people were placed in sarcophagi was a fantastic way to conclude this ancient Egypt experience. Taking a break from the museum, I found a vending machine with crushed strawberry, an unusual flavor for the beverage in my experience, and truthfully made me curious. I'd had Fanta version of the same flavor, but not Crushes. Struggling to open the tab, I found myself actually enjoying the soda. It was a tad too sweet, as all the sodas are, but I could feel it on my teeth honestly, which wasn't great. Still, I'd have to give the flavor a 7 out of 10. One thing I haven't touched on yet are these Mold-O-Rama machines. The museum has 6 of these plastic collectibles, and I wanted them all. Previously, I'd collected the red T-Rex and the green Apatosaurus, and even 2 that were no longer produced. First was the white Stegosaurus, which was nice, but the way each one fell out of the machine once it was done was even funnier. The green Ankylosaurus, the tan lion, and the blue Quetzalcoatlus. Anyways, back to the museum proper. A smaller section was the animal mechanics, displaying how many human machines were based on the exceptional feats completed by other animal bodies, like a giraffe's massive heart generating force, or the insulation of a whale. Or even thermal vision as well. The mantis shrimp punching at 1/1000th of a second was the most impressive, the speed of a bullet, which is absolutely insane to me. Reaction speed of a mantis shrimp might be a new hyperbole. The next larger section was Evolving Planet, and by long I mean here's what I'm doing for the next hour and a half long. Starting from the very first formation of life in single-celled organisms, thriving in the water-heavy planet that we call Earth. These organisms took advantage of the sun's rays and filtered out oxygen from their bodies. In a world of water, protecting these organisms from the harsh sunlight above, each one represented an ancestral version of all life we know today in one way or another. Like how ancestral chordates had the first semblance of a backbone that humans have. With the dispersal of oxygen and formation of our atmosphere, life could move on to land, starting with these ancestral plants, giving way for land animals to sustain themselves as well. This increase in plant life sprouted new opportunities for biodiversity across species, further gaining new traits to aid them in this transition. Organisms that resemble more and more like these multicellular organisms we see today. With such a boom, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, right, mass extinction. Yes, with the rapid increase of life and seismic activity, the heat became too unbearable for many species to survive, resulting in their extinction. But, with extinction brings forth opportunity. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods featured the dinosaurs, a new era for life on Earth. These fantastic casts and fossils were truly astounding. Positioned in ways they would have looked like on Earth before, their adaptations, habits, and potential food chain brought to Earth in a whole new cycle for its living organisms. Looking outside briefly gave me the chance to reflect on how life was so incredibly different 200 million years ago, and how far the world has come since then. Theropods and their adornment for attracting mates are warded off rivals? Which is it? I think that'd be a pretty important distinction to make, with 2 very different uses. Now it's time for Sue the T-Rex, a complete fossil assemblage of history's most iconic dinosaur. It has to be seen to be believed, for its sheer presence alone. Limbs for slashing prey or grasping a partner? Again, another distinction that should probably be made given how different those actions are, no? Regardless, the dinosaurs face another mass extinction. This one in the form of a meteor that caused the obscuration of the sun for decades, wiping out the life that relied on it. Like with every extinction, it grants new opportunities. The mammals rose from the ashes to thrive in these colder climates through social-based behaviors and eventually formed more similar to us today. Though not all mammals were primates, as the giant sloth from before makes its grand return, and it is absolutely gigantic. These mammals of our recent past all thrived impressively with their great mass, adaptation for the cold, and pack mentality to keep each other safe. Nothing could stop them at this point. I should have seen this coming. The final recorded mass extinction occurred not by a catastrophic disaster, but the human activities desolating Earth's resources. So many species were lost by human action, and our only hope now is to support the efforts in rebuilding the planet's ecosystems. Next was the China exhibit, delving into its deep roots far beyond the many stereotypes in the West assume. More detail on its inner divides before it became the People's Republic of China, and the interactions with other nations through trade, and at a push, war. Much like the Ancient Americas exhibit, it doesn't paint the population in any extreme light, both positive or negative, rather an informative and clear way to any guest to appreciate regardless of their cultural background. Next was the plants. Much like the animals previously, taxidermy replicas of each species were on display. But more than their physical appearances, understanding their origins and usages by humans throughout history. How humans have selected plant traits to be grown for their own products, which has fundamentally shaped the world we know today. Last was exploring the Pacific and how the overglorification of island life is a product of the boom in tourism for the upper classes. Thriving on islands is much more tumultuous than one would imagine when it comes to agriculture conditions, seismic risks, and the formation of disasters like tsunamis. This postcard rendition of island life is not quite accurate at its fullest, a fraction of the full picture. Not to mention how these people were taken advantage of for bomb testing under the guise of unimportance. Yet those who formed life here on Holman Islands are some of the most resilient people in human history. And so it was time for me to depart the Field Museum. As it turns out, those random chairs and tables were for an event that we're hosting later that night, so it makes a bit more sense now why they were just everywhere. I can't say enough how wonderful the Field Museum was, and one I didn't appreciate nearly enough in the past. Tonight's dinner was at the new trendy place called Birdman Ramen, which I was excited for since I love ramen at home, but they don't use pork broth here, which I guess is their gimmick. At the time I did enjoy it, but overall the flavor wasn't as rich as I'd liked it to be, which was unfortunate. 6 out of 10. And that's a wrap on day 3. Very eventful, a lot of walking, and a lot of just confusion when it comes to navigation. But tomorrow is my favorite museum, I'm very excited for that. But first, I have to show you the molds, Ankylosaurus, Quetzalcoatlus, Lion, Stegosaurus, and they'll join the collection back at home, which I'm very excited. But we still have some days left of this trip, so bye for now. Day 4 started at the Luna Cafe with the standard breakfast platter as usual. This one had lightning fast service with great eggs and hash browns, 8 out of 10. This museum was a bit further than the others, but nothing a quick bus ride couldn't fix. At last I'd arrived at the Museum of Science and Industry. What wonderful exhibits awaited me, I was ready to explore once again. The first of which was the Zephyr, one of the United States' fastest trains, and how its construction changed the transport industry forever. With multiple models covering vast distances across the states, it was simply fantastic. Topping at 112 miles per hour, a land speed had never been so convenient to achieve for the masses. With such a rich history, I wonder why we don't see these trains today. Ah, that's why. Cars and roads, the bane of all trains. Moving on from that unfortunate truth led me down the Moldorama experience, showcasing the founding of these plastic souvenirs that I've become obsessed with. From standard tourist locales to more exclusive pieces, these molds have them all. Next was space travel, humanity's goals to expand into space. Rocket ships, advanced technology, and rising minds, and SpaceX. That definitely wasn't here 7 years ago. With the rise of SpaceX's competing technologies, space travel has continued to flourish with more and more efficient designs. This model of the ISS has its own mini Canada arm, which was quite cute. Each launch into space believes in a future in which new planets can be inhabited beyond what humanity has been capable of in the past. Speaking of the past, we return to the ground to a much less explorative time, one of great loss, tragedy, violence, and tension. World War II devastated the world when the Axis powers' movements came to take down entire nations, forcing its residents to submit under their regime. Thousands of lives lost in these battles across the Atlantic in a constant arms race of technology, knowledge, weaponry against one another. Years of transporting supplies, hunting down forces, and gathering as much intel as possible to change the tide of the war was crucial. The role of women volunteers as member of the Waves was just as important as for building these code-breaking computers intercepting signals from enemy ships. Weaponry like torpedoes and depth charges were used to take down the German U-boats like the one they have on display here. Yes, after successfully capturing one during the war, the Americans were able to turn the tables against the enemy by using this technology as intel. Forcing the U-boats back won the war for the Allied forces. These machines were no joke, with powerful weapons capable of the destruction they caused. After capture, it was brought here to the museum for the masses to learn about every ounce it took these soldiers to preserve the peace times we have today. Their service will never be forgotten as we take the time to appreciate its complicated past. On a lighter tone, we have the engineering behind farming. Agriculture and its development are the reason why the human population has been able to reach such heights in the first place. Gatherings of large civilizations were only possible with its development. Also, I'm pretty sure this display is the same thing 7 years ago, so it definitely shows its age. They also featured a baby chicks incubator, being raised, which everyone flocked to expectantly, but it was quite a cute display in their mini holiday decor. Back to sea with the ships gallery, an array of wonderfully crafted model ships displaying the timeline of these fine vessels, how each one has evolved for its unique purposes, as well as how humans have discovered ways of navigation, shipping, and power. Steam versus sail is a large change that occurred that eventually transitioned into the oil-based fuels. Still, its history of human craftsmanship allowing for our species to traverse the other 75% of our Earth is still amazing to this day. Back in the lobby, there were these Christmas trees celebrating the holidays from around the world across many different cultural practices, and so much like the Field Museum, there's a Moldoramas here too. Probably indicated by the Moldorama exhibit earlier, and just like the Field Museum, each one falls in a uniquely funny way. And also like before, I need to collect all of the ones I was missing. The global Christmas trees were nothing like I'd ever seen before and really captivated every guest here. They even had a tree for Canada featuring little souvenirs from each of our wonderful provinces. Past that, there was the Institute of Transportation featuring a model train set depicting the train journey from Seattle to Chicago. While not used in passenger rail often, the rail line is still quite crucial for the shipment of goods and supplies. I'll always have a soft spot for trains, and the model ones are quite impressive as well. Each detail of the cars, the environments, and the inner workings all kept my attention during my visit. They even had a model version of Chicago itself with its own Willis Tower. Hopefully I won't lose it this time. The display seemed fairly optimistic about the future of trains, so let's hope that comes true. At the base of the steam engine was a little interactive to show just how steam power worked in these machines. This next bit was one I'm very nostalgic about, and that's the Toy Maker Factory, a guide to how toys are engineered, and you can even make your own mechanical spinning top, but today was out of order. I mean, I had one before, so I guess I really didn't need another, I suppose. Our next major section was science storms, how weather, natural phenomena, and the laws of physics affect our lives day to day. This area featured many interactions displaying the effects of gravity on avalanches, the suction effect tornadoes inflict, and how seismic plates cause mass force underwater, unleashing tsunamis onto land. This section was a lot of fun to explore again, but its grand centerpiece was a ceiling Tesla coil that sparked once per half hour. From there, we had the Everything About You exhibit featuring many interactives about human health and personality, such as the myths of happiness. Let's see if, scientifically speaking, money does buy you happiness. Oh, would you look at that, it does. Okay, well, how about resilience? How does one keep up when knocked down? Finding a loving partner. Of course it would say that. Anyways, check out these planes. WestJet donated one of their vessels to be displayed here and to discuss the history of air travel and how much really goes on behind the scenes. So much machinery is required to make one of these giant things fly in the air, which is quite impressive in itself. To close out the day, I got to catch this part of the marble Rube Goldberg machine following a metal balls vacation to Switzerland. I finished off the day at Italy's pizza and pasta place, where I had an absolutely divine spaghetti aglio olio. 10 out of 10. Excited to make this for myself when I get home. And that's a wrap on day 4, another successful day at the museums. Very excited, and tomorrow's our last attraction day. But first, our Moldoramas, we got the little yellow chicks. Little milk white cow for some reason, but it replaced the tractor and I had to get it. Willis Tower, maybe I won't lose it this time. Space Taxi from the World's Fair in New York. And the Chicago skyline with its own Millennium Gate bean. Alright, we'll see you tomorrow for the final attraction day. The final day started at Melly's Cafe, where I had this egg white scramble. The vegetables were very much appreciated, though I did miss egg yolk somewhat. 8 out of 10. Today's walk back to museum campus was very foggy. A mild temperature day after a colder one prior resulted in this serene yet ominous atmosphere. It was a Sunday morning, so hardly anyone was walking around, giving me a lot of time to think for myself, reflect upon this trip thus far. I'd done so much walking, exploring, and enjoyed my vacation away from the monotony of normal life. Though, part of me felt like I was running away rather than seeking a break. Arriving at the front gates of our final attraction, the Shed Aquarium is the third largest aquarium in North America by volume, but looking at this map, I grew concerned that a significant portion was temporarily closed. Uh-oh. Still, I pressed on and was greeted immediately by the beluga whales. I'd never seen them in person before, and despite my feelings about these large animals being held in captivity, I myself became a captive audience to their slow, hypnotic movements. Something about their swimming style, how they followed a similar path to one another, led me to just watch in awe. Their friendly smiles and community made me feel warm inside, I don't know. Next was the penguins, and many of these were quite small compared to some species in Antarctica. They were fast swimmers, but many dwelled on the rocks above, conversing with one another. Following that, we had the dolphins, and they had the show going on above the water, but from here it was equally as interesting to watch their diving styles and patterns. In this lighting, you can see how in sync they move, which was very impressive overall. I especially liked the part where this dolphin swam down and just ripped apart this piece of cabbage. The river otters were also quite cute, flapping around on their backs, swimming through the bottom sections of this water. In this beautiful green lighting, it was quite adorable to see. The above water stage is where the dolphin show happens, but it only runs at specific times during the day, so I'd have to come back later if I wanted to see the full thing. Moving into the aquarium's main exhibits, I found these fantastic environmental tanks featuring all sorts of sea life. From various biomes, oceans, and lakes, these specimens were very intriguing to see how they moved about. The exhibit also included plaques displaying the history of migration for each species, and how the aquarium is putting in work to prevent their extinction. Particularly endangered species are, well, endangered. As such, some are being kept here and bred in captivity, enough so their numbers can return to normal and go back into the wild to be rehabilitated. No matter the size, species, or scarcity, the Shed Aquarium made sure to treat each of these fish with the utmost of care. What really blew me away though was the reef tank. It was by far the largest, with countless species, sharks swimming about as well. This was an absolute delight to see for myself up close. There's something charming about seeing large predators like sharks meeting up with these smaller prey fish and whatnot throughout this giant tank, showing that the balance of life is much more well managed here than other places or in the wild in a sense. Sea dragons as well, which were native to Australia's coast, were great to see, and only ever seen in pictures prior to my visit. I'd made my way to the Great Lakes section left, but what I saw with the sign was missing a number. Where was Exhibit 6? Probably one that was closed previously, I guess. This Great Lakes maps also featured Toronto along Lake Ontario, which was cool to see. Though it also featured Harrisburg, where a certain infamous theme park is nearby. Sorry, just flashbacks to that horrible place. The freshwater fish seem to be very different to the saltwater ones, each one separate into smaller tanks separate from the masses, unlike the reefs. Each one had a unique way of survival in these smaller environments, which was a great way to close out the aquarium. Okay, well, I did promise a dolphin show, so here it is. For copyright reasons, I can't play the music they were playing in the moment, so please enjoy the show for what it is. At the gift shop, I found this book called All You Need Is Less, but for it to be in a gift store felt very counterintuitive to its messaging. With half the day left, I decided to walk along Lake Michigan back into the loop on this foggy day. The views are fantastic, and I even got to see the Crown Fountain in Grant Park. Though because it was winter, there wasn't any water spouting out like usual, unfortunately. I did happen to find the Hershey's Super Sweet Adventure, which is very ironic given what we found earlier, and I can't believe they have— Anyways, dinner tonight was at another major deep dish pizza place called Giordano's. I got my own personal size one, and it was as delightful as Malnati's. The cheese was nicer, but I have to give the Ed Illuminati's for the sauce. Still, 8 out of 10. And that's the end of day 5 in our Chicago trip. So, tomorrow we're going to O'Hare Airport, and we'll see you then for the grand conclusion. By grand conclusion, I mean just my closing remarks about the trip and whatnot. Bye for now. Before my departure, I decided to rank the 5 attractions I attended in Chicago, list some pros and cons of each one in case you ever decide to visit the city yourself. And number 5 is the Shed Aquarium. While it makes for some beautiful sights and grand displays, the overall experience is quite short and somewhat underwhelming. Quantity-wise, that is. A great place for a half-day commitment, though. Number 4 is the Sky Deck, a fantastic set of views from one of the most iconic buildings, and its mini-museum was also quite well put together. Though, like the Shed Aquarium, it can feel like it's over before it really begins. It ranks a little higher, though, for the sheer wow factor and cohesion of the experience. Number 3 is the Art Institute of Chicago. Its impressive collections and rich history led me to rank this one quite high. For art enthusiasts, this is quite the establishment with some of the most intricate and famous pieces on display. For the public, it's also quite enjoyable, though I would say it's a little more niche as an attraction. Not the best fit for small children or those who find art galleries boring. Number 2 is the Museum of Science and Industry, a fantastic collection of engaging and informative exhibits spanning all fields of the sciences. The best attraction for families and children, I'd say. Overall, I would say it is the best. However, number 1 has to be the Field Museum. This one wasn't my favorite when I first visited 7 years prior, but it really grew on me this time around. The histories of each civilization and society, as well as how the actions of colonization have shifted our world, truly hit close this time around. Feeling fully immersed in each exhibit's stories, displays, and lives really made this trip feel special. I think being alone here with my thoughts allowed me to fully appreciate it in a way I never would have before. This museum has enough to keep people of all demographics occupied and entertained, but its true value comes from the history enthusiasts much like myself. And that brings us to the end. I arrived at O'Hare Airport for my flight back to Toronto, where I'd return to everyday life once again. This trip was truly amazing, and going solo was an experience I couldn't have even imagined before. There were times of joy, frustration, connection, and isolation, and it gave me the time to really reflect how I really feel about traveling on my own, with my own agenda and my own choices throughout. However, every day on this trip left me somewhat emptier than before. Sure, I was independent and able to choose exactly what I wanted my trip to be, but it also meant I didn't have anyone to experience it with. Every museum I explored, restaurant I enjoyed, atmosphere I basked in, all of it, I was alone. That sense of control in exchange for comfort was apparently true as I saw couples, families, friends, all visiting these places together. No matter how frustrated they were or disagreements they at least had each other. They were together. This trip gave me time to reflect on my perspective on traveling and whether being alone is something I can accept or something I should try to fix, but for this sort of thing, there's not really an easy fix to it. I do love being able to choose my own path, but truthfully, it would be nice to have someone walk it beside me. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to future travels that 2025 may bring. Until next time, bye for now.